The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Clarence's house, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Staff members moved quietly through the corridors, their footsteps muffled by thick Persian carpets that had witnessed decades of royal history. In the main hallway, where portraits of the royal family hung in carefully arranged displays, something was about to change. Sergeant James Mitchell had been a royal protection officer for 15 years. He had seen 3 different monarchs, countless state visits, and more family drama than any tabloid could imagine. At 52, his graying hair and steady demeanor made him a trusted figure among the palace staff. He knew every corner of every royal residence, every protocol, and, most importantly, every rule about what could and could not be moved or changed without proper authorization. This particular Tuesday morning started like any other. The Queen Consort Camilla had requested a private meeting with the head of household staff to discuss some interior adjustments to Clarence's house. The meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning, and Mitchell was assigned to his usual post near the main entrance hall. He had no idea that within hours, he would find himself at the center of a controversy that would ripple through the royal household for months to come. Camilla Parker Bowles, now Queen Consort, had always been particular about her surroundings. Since marrying King Charles, she had gradually made changes to various royal residences, always within the bounds of what was considered appropriate. However, those who worked closely with the royal family knew that there was one subject that remained delicate: anything related to Princess Diana. The late Princess of Wales continued to cast a long shadow over the royal family, even decades after her tragic death in 1997. Her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, had ensured that their mother's memory was preserved in various ways throughout the royal residences. Portraits, photographs, and personal items remained displayed in positions of honor, serving as constant reminders of the woman who had captured the world's heart. In the main corridor of Clarence's house hung a particularly striking portrait of Diana. Painted by renowned artist Nelson Shanks in 1994, it showed the princess in an elegant blue dress, her famous sapphire engagement ring clearly visible on her finger. The portrait had been personally selected by Prince William and had hung in that exact spot since 2005, when Charles and Camilla had first moved into the residence as their primary home. The painting was more than just decoration. For the staff who had served the royal family for years, it represented continuity and respect for the past. Many of them had worked directly with Diana during her lifetime and felt a personal connection to preserving her legacy. The portrait's placement was considered sacred ground, untouchable without explicit permission from the highest levels of the royal hierarchy. Camilla appeared in the corridor at exactly 10:15, accompanied by Mrs. Helena Forsyth, the head of household staff. Mrs. Forsyth was a woman in her early 60s who had managed royal residences for over 30 years. She was known for her diplomatic skills and her ability to navigate the complex relationships within the royal household. Today, however, she looked unusually tense as she walked alongside the Queen Consort. "I've been thinking about this space for some time," Camilla said, her voice carrying the refined accent that came from years of high society living. She gestured toward the wall where Diana's portrait hung prominently. "The lighting here isn't quite right for that particular piece. I think it might be better suited for one of the smaller drawing rooms upstairs." Mrs. Forsyth nodded diplomatically, though Mitchell noticed the slight hesitation in her response. "Of course, Your Majesty. However, I believe that particular portrait was positioned here at the specific request of Prince William. Perhaps we should consult with him before making any changes?" Camilla's expression remained pleasant, but Mitchell, trained to read subtle changes in body language, detected a flash of irritation. "I'm sure William would understand that we need to make the best use of our space. This is, after all, our primary residence now. I'm not suggesting we remove it entirely, just relocate it to a more appropriate setting." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Mrs. Forsyth politely suggesting various protocols that should be followed before moving any significant artwork. Camilla listened with apparent patience, but Mitchell could sense her growing frustration with the bureaucratic obstacles being presented. Finally, Camilla made a decision that would set the day's events in motion. "I think we're overcomplicating this," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's simply a matter of interior design. Let's have it moved this afternoon, and we can discuss the final placement later with the family." Mrs. Forsyth's discomfort was now clearly visible. Your Majesty, with all due respect, I really do think we should obtain proper clearance before Helena, Camilla interrupted gently but firmly. I appreciate your attention to protocol, but I'm quite capable of making decisions about the decoration of my own home. Please arrange for the portrait to be moved to the blue drawing room upstairs before this evening. Mitchell watched as Mrs. Forsyth struggled with the direct order. As head of household staff, she was caught between her loyalty to the Queen Consort and her understanding of the unwritten rules that governed the royal household. Moving Diana's portrait without proper consultation could create serious problems, but directly refusing Camilla's request was equally problematic. Very well, Your Majesty, Mrs. Forsyth finally replied. I'll arrange for the art handlers to move it this afternoon. As the two women continued their tour of the residence, Mitchell remained at his post, but his mind was racing. He had heard enough of the conversation to understand the situation, and his years of experience told him that this decision could have serious consequences. The royal family's relationship with Diana's memory was still sensitive, and any changes to how she was honored or remembered required careful handling. Mitchell had served during Diana's lifetime and had witnessed firsthand the love and respect she commanded from the staff. He had also seen how carefully her sons had worked to preserve her memory in appropriate ways throughout the royal residences. The thought of her portrait being moved without their knowledge or consent troubled him deeply. As the afternoon approached, Mitchell found himself in an increasingly difficult position. His duty was to protect the royal family, but that protection extended beyond physical security to preserving the institution's reputation and maintaining the delicate balance of relationships within the family. He knew that if Diana's portrait was moved without proper consultation, it could create a scandal that would damage everyone involved. The art handlers arrived at 3 o'clock, professional men in white gloves who specialized in moving valuable paintings and artifacts. They had received their instructions from Mrs. Forsyth and had come prepared with the proper equipment to safely relocate the portrait. Mitchell watched as they began to prepare for the move, setting up their protective materials and discussing the best approach for handling the large painting. The portrait itself was substantial, measuring 4 feet by 3 feet and housed in an ornate gold frame that had been specifically chosen to complement the corridor's decor. The painting captured Diana at the height of her popularity, her blue eyes seeming to follow observers as they passed through the hallway. For years, visitors to Clarence House had paused to admire the portrait, and it had become an unofficial memorial to the beloved princess. As the art handlers began to lift the portrait from its hooks, Mitchell made a decision that would define his career and place him at the center of one of the most talked-about incidents in recent royal history. He had spent 15 years protecting the royal family, and he understood that sometimes protection meant making difficult choices in real time, without the luxury of consulting higher authorities. Excuse me, gentlemen, Mitchell said, stepping forward with the authority that came from years of royal service. I'm going to need you to stop what you're doing. The art handlers paused, confused by the interruption. They looked between Mitchell and each other, unsure of how to proceed. One of them, the team leader, spoke up. We have direct orders from Mrs. Forsyth to move this piece to the blue drawing room upstairs. Mitchell nodded. I understand that, but I'm afraid I can't allow this portrait to be moved without proper authorization from the relevant members of the royal family. The situation was unprecedented. Royal protection officers rarely interfered with household management decisions, and the art handlers had never encountered such a situation. The team leader tried to explain that they were following official orders, but Mitchell remained firm in his position. I need you to put the portrait back exactly where it was, Mitchell said calmly but with unmistakable authority. There are protocols that must be followed when it comes to items of this significance. At that moment, Mrs. Forsyth appeared in the corridor, having heard about the delay from other staff members. Her face showed the strain of a woman caught in an impossible situation. Sergeant Mitchell, is there a problem here? Mitchell turned to face her, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the awkwardness of the situation. Mrs. Forsyth, I have concerns about moving this particular portrait without proper consultation with Prince William and Prince Harry. Given its significance and their personal connection to it, I believe we should obtain their explicit approval before making any changes. Mrs. Forsyth's expression showed both relief and anxiety. Relief because Mitchell was voicing the concerns she had been unable to express directly to Camilla, and anxiety because the situation was becoming increasingly complicated. "Sergeant Mitchell, we have direct instructions from Her Majesty the Queen Consort." "I understand that," Mitchell replied, "but, as a protection officer, my primary concern is the welfare and reputation of the entire royal family. Moving this portrait without proper consultation could create problems that would be damaging to everyone involved." The standoff continued for several tense minutes. The art handlers remained frozen in place, unsure whether to follow their original instructions or comply with Mitchell's request. Mrs. Forsyth found herself in the impossible position of choosing between competing authorities within the royal household. The situation was about to become even more complicated, as word of the delay had begun to spread among the staff, and it was only a matter of time before Camilla herself would learn about the interference with her direct orders. News traveled fast within the walls of Clarence House. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, whispers about the stopped portrait removal had reached every corner of the residence. Kitchen staff paused in their preparation of the evening meal to discuss the unprecedented situation. Housekeepers found reasons to walk past the main corridor to see the painting still hanging in its original position. Even the gardeners, working on the grounds outside, had heard rumors about some kind of standoff involving Diana's portrait. For Mitchell, the waiting was the hardest part. He remained at his post, knowing that Camilla would soon learn about his interference with her direct orders. He had made his decision based on 15 years of experience and a deep understanding of royal protocol, but he also knew that challenging the Queen Consort's authority could have serious consequences for his career. The other members of the royal protection team were divided in their opinions about Mitchell's actions. Some believed he had overstepped his authority by interfering in household management decisions. Others felt he had shown wisdom and courage by protecting the family from a potentially damaging controversy. The debate among the security staff reflected the broader uncertainty about how to handle situations involving Diana's legacy. Mrs. Forsyth spent the afternoon in her office, making careful notes about the situation and consulting with legal advisors about the proper protocols for handling artwork within royal residences. She had worked in the royal household long enough to know that situations like this required careful documentation and clear communication with all relevant parties. Her decades of experience had taught her that small incidents could quickly escalate into major scandals if not handled properly. At 4:30, a member of Camilla's personal staff appeared in the corridor where Mitchell was stationed. Lady Margaret Thornberry was Camilla's private secretary, a sharp woman in her 40s who had earned a reputation for efficiency and discretion. Her presence indicated that news of the portrait situation had reached Camilla's inner circle. "Sergeant Mitchell," Lady Margaret said, approaching with the measured steps of someone accustomed to delivering difficult messages. "Her Majesty would like to speak with you in her private sitting room." Mitchell nodded, maintaining his professional composure despite knowing that this conversation would likely determine his future with the Royal Protection Service. "Of course, Lady Margaret. Should I arrange for another officer to cover my post?" "That won't be necessary. This shouldn't take long." As they walked through the residence toward Camilla's private quarters, Mitchell reflected on the path that had brought him to this moment. He had joined the Royal Protection Service as a young man, drawn by the opportunity to serve his country and protect some of its most important figures. Over the years, he had traveled the world with various members of the royal family, witnessed historic events, and earned the trust and respect of those he protected. The job had never been just about physical security. Royal protection officers were expected to understand complex social dynamics, navigate delicate political situations, and make split-second decisions that could have far-reaching consequences. They were trained to think several steps ahead, to anticipate problems before they occurred, and to protect not just the physical safety of the royal family but their reputation and standing as well. Mitchell had always prided himself on his ability to balance competing interests and find solutions that served everyone's best interests. Today, however, he faced a situation where there might not be a solution that pleased everyone involved. Camilla's private sitting room was elegantly furnished with antique pieces and family photographs. Large windows overlooked the residence's gardens, where late afternoon sunlight filtered through ancient oak trees. The room reflected Camilla's personal taste, with warm colors and comfortable furniture that created an atmosphere of relaxed sophistication. The Queen Consort was seated at a small writing desk when Mitchell entered, reviewing what appeared to be correspondence. She looked up as he approached, her expression pleasant but unreadable. Lady Margaret withdrew to a corner of the room, maintaining the discreet presence that was expected of royal staff during such meetings. "Sergeant Mitchell," Camilla said, setting down her pen and turning to face him fully. "I understand there's been some confusion this afternoon regarding my instructions about the portrait in the main corridor." Mitchell stood at attention, his years of military training evident in his posture. "Your Majesty, I apologize for any inconvenience my actions may have caused. However, I felt it was necessary to pause the removal until proper protocols could be followed." Camilla's smile remained in place, but her voice carried a note of steel. "I see. And what protocols, exactly, do you believe were not followed? I am, after all, the Queen Consort and the mistress of this residence." "You are absolutely correct, Your Majesty," Mitchell replied carefully. "However, my understanding is that the particular portrait in question was placed in its current location at the specific request of Prince William, in memory of his mother. Given the sensitivity of anything related to Princess Diana's legacy, I believed it would be prudent to consult with the Prince of Wales before making any changes." The room fell silent for a moment. Camilla's fingers drummed lightly on the desk surface, a subtle sign of her internal calculation of the situation. She was an intelligent woman who understood the complex dynamics of royal relationships as well as anyone. She also knew that Mitchell's concerns, while inconvenient, were not without merit. "Sergeant Mitchell," she said finally, "I appreciate your dedication to protocol. However, I must point out that as the current residents of this house, His Majesty and I have the authority to make decisions about its decoration and management. The portrait is not being destroyed or disrespected in any way. It's simply being moved to a different location within the same residence." Mitchell remained respectful but firm in his response. "Your Majesty, I completely understand your position, and I have the utmost respect for your authority in this matter. My only concern is that Prince William and Prince Harry have been very particular about how their mother's memory is preserved and displayed. They have specifically requested to be consulted about any changes to items related to Princess Diana." "Have they indeed?" Camilla's tone had cooled noticeably. "And when exactly did they make this request? I don't recall being informed of any such arrangement." Lady Margaret cleared her throat softly and stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if I may, there was indeed a memorandum circulated several years ago regarding items connected to the late princess. The Prince of Wales's office requested that any changes to Diana-related displays be coordinated with them in advance." Camilla turned to look at her private secretary with an expression of surprise and, Mitchell thought, annoyance. "I see. And why was I not made aware of this memorandum?" "It was included in the general briefing materials when you and His Majesty first took residence here," Lady Margaret replied diplomatically. "However, given the volume of information at that time, it's quite understandable that this particular detail might have been overlooked. The conversation was revealing the complex layers of protocol and communication that governed royal households. Even the Queen Consort, with all her experience and authority, could find herself unaware of specific arrangements that had been made years earlier. The situation highlighted the challenges of managing relationships and expectations within an institution that had evolved over centuries." Mitchell watched as Camilla processed this new information. He could see her weighing her options, considering the potential consequences of different courses of action. She was clearly frustrated by the unexpected obstacles to what she had considered a simple interior design decision, but she was also experienced enough to recognize when a situation required careful handling. "Very well," Camilla said after a long pause. "I understand that there are sensitivities that I was not fully aware of. However, Sergeant Mitchell, I must say that I find your method of addressing this issue somewhat inappropriate. If you had concerns about the portrait removal, the proper course of action would have been to bring those concerns to me directly, rather than interfering with my staff's work." Mitchell accepted the criticism with professional grace. "You are absolutely right, Your Majesty, and I apologize for not following proper channels. However, the situation was developing quickly, and I felt that immediate action was necessary to prevent a potential problem. What kind of problem, exactly? Camilla asked, her tone suggesting that she already suspected the answer. Your Majesty, in my experience, any changes to items related to Princess Diana can attract significant media attention. If the portrait had been moved without Prince William's knowledge, and if that information had somehow reached the press, it could have been portrayed as disrespectful to the late princess's memory. Such a story could be damaging to Your Majesty's reputation and to the royal family as a whole. The mention of potential media scrutiny clearly struck a chord with Camilla. She had spent years dealing with press coverage that ranged from supportive to hostile, and she understood better than most how quickly a small incident could be blown out of proportion by tabloid newspapers looking for scandal. I see your point, she said quietly. However, I must ask you to consider my position in this matter. I am trying to create a comfortable home for my husband and myself, and I should be able to make reasonable adjustments to our living space without every decision being subject to external approval. Mitchell nodded sympathetically. I completely understand your frustration, Your Majesty. This is indeed your home, and you should feel comfortable making it reflect your preferences. Perhaps there's a way to address both concerns. What do you suggest? Camilla asked, her tone indicating genuine interest in finding a solution. With your permission, Your Majesty, I could contact Prince William's office to discuss the portrait situation. If we explain your concerns about the lighting and positioning, there might be alternative solutions that would address your needs while respecting the existing arrangements. Camilla considered this proposal for several minutes. The suggestion offered her a face-saving way to resolve the immediate crisis while maintaining her dignity and authority. It also acknowledged the legitimate concerns that had been raised about protocol and family sensitivities. That seems reasonable, she said finally. However, I want to be clear about something, Sergeant Mitchell. While I appreciate your concern for the family's welfare, I cannot have members of my security detail making unilateral decisions about household management issues. If similar situations arise in the future, you must bring your concerns to me directly before taking any independent action. Understood completely, Your Majesty. You have my word that I will follow proper channels in the future. Good. Now, Lady Margaret, please contact Prince William's office to arrange a discussion about the portrait. Explain that we're interested in optimizing the artwork displays throughout the residence and would welcome their input on the best arrangements. As the meeting concluded, Mitchell felt a mixture of relief and continued apprehension. He had successfully prevented what could have been a damaging incident, and he had maintained his professional relationship with the Queen Consort. However, he knew that his actions had created ripples that would continue to spread throughout the royal household. The portrait remained in its original position for the rest of the day, but the incident had raised questions about authority, protocol, and the ongoing complexities of Diana's legacy within the royal family. Mitchell returned to his post knowing that his intervention had been necessary, but also understanding that it had opened up larger conversations about how the royal household managed competing interests and sensitivities. The story was far from over, and the consequences of this afternoon's confrontation would continue to unfold in the days and weeks to come. The phone call to Prince William's office came at precisely 6 o'clock that evening. Lady Margaret, true to her reputation for efficiency, had arranged the conversation through the proper diplomatic channels, ensuring that the request would be treated with the seriousness it deserved. On the other end of the line was Sir David Harrison, William's private secretary and one of the most experienced courtiers in the royal household. Sir David had served the royal family for over 20 years, beginning his career during Diana's lifetime and continuing through the turbulent years following her death. He understood better than most the delicate balance required when dealing with matters related to the late Princess of Wales. His calm demeanor and diplomatic skills had helped navigate numerous sensitive situations over the years. Lady Margaret, Sir David said after listening to her carefully worded explanation of the afternoon's events. I must say, this is quite an unusual situation. Let me make sure I understand correctly. Her Majesty the Queen Consort wished to relocate the Shanks portrait of the late princess, and this was prevented by one of the protection officers? That's essentially correct, Lady Margaret replied, choosing her words carefully. Sergeant Mitchell expressed concerns about protocol and suggested that Prince William's office should be consulted before any changes were made to the portrait's placement. There was a pause on the line as Sir David processed this information. He was well aware of the memorandum that had been circulated years earlier regarding Diana-related items, but he was also surprised that a protection officer had felt empowered to intervene in what should have been a straightforward household management decision. I see. And Her Majesty's position on this intervention? Her Majesty was initially surprised by the interference, but, after discussing the situation, she agreed that consultation would be appropriate before making any changes. Sir David appreciated the diplomatic language being used, but he could read between the lines. The situation had clearly been tense, and Camilla's agreement to consult was likely more about damage control than genuine enthusiasm for external input on her household arrangements. Very well. I'll need to brief His Royal Highness immediately. This is exactly the sort of situation that requires his personal attention. Can you arrange for all parties to be available for a conference call this evening? Certainly. What time would be convenient? Shall we say 8 o'clock? That will give me time to speak with Prince William and prepare him for the discussion. As Lady Margaret confirmed the arrangements, word of the upcoming call spread through the relevant offices of the royal household. This type of high-level consultation about Diana-related matters was relatively rare, and it indicated that the portrait incident had been elevated to the highest levels of family decision-making. Prince William was at Kensington Palace when Sir David briefed him about the situation at Clarence House. The Prince of Wales was in his study, reviewing papers related to his environmental initiatives, when his private secretary knocked on the door with news of the urgent call from Camilla's office. William listened to the explanation with growing concern. As Diana's eldest son, he had worked hard over the years to ensure that his mother's memory was preserved and honored in appropriate ways. The portrait at Clarence House was particularly significant because it had been chosen specifically for that location as a tribute that visitors to his father's residence would see and remember. So let me understand this, William said after Sir David finished his briefing. Camilla wanted to move Mother's portrait, and a protection officer stopped her? That appears to be the case, Your Royal Highness. Sergeant Mitchell cited the standing arrangement that your office should be consulted about changes to Diana-related displays. William rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar tension that arose whenever his mother's legacy became entangled in family politics. He had spent years trying to balance respect for his mother's memory with the practical realities of his father's new marriage. It was a delicate balance that required constant attention and diplomatic handling. What's Camilla's stated reason for wanting to move it? According to Lady Margaret, concerns about lighting and the overall aesthetic arrangement of the corridor. William considered this explanation. He knew that Camilla had been making gradual changes to the royal residences since marrying his father, and most of these changes had been reasonable and uncontroversial. However, anything involving his mother's portraits or personal items remained sensitive territory that required careful navigation. And, father? Has he been consulted about this? Not according to the information we've received. It appears to have been Her Majesty's independent decision. This added another layer of complexity to the situation. William knew that his father often preferred to avoid direct involvement in matters that might create tension between his wife and his sons. Charles had worked hard to maintain family harmony, but situations like this one tested the limits of diplomatic neutrality. Right. Set up the call as arranged, but I want to speak with Harry first. He should be aware of this situation, and we should present a united front if necessary. Prince Harry was at his home in Montecito, California, when the call came through from his brother's office. The time difference meant that it was mid-afternoon in California, and Harry was in his garden with his children when his phone rang with the distinctive tone reserved for urgent royal family communications. The conversation between the brothers was brief but intense. Despite the geographical distance and the well-documented tensions in their relationship, both men shared a fierce protective instinct when it came to their mother's legacy. The portrait at Clarence House represented more than just decoration. It was a symbol of Diana's continued presence in their father's life and a reminder to the world that she remained an important part of the royal family's history. This is exactly the kind of thing we were worried about, Harry said, his voice carrying the frustration of someone who had fought these battles before. It starts with moving a portrait, and, before you know it, Mother's memory is being systematically erased from the royal residences. William understood his brother's concerns, but he also recognized the need for diplomatic handling. I don't think Camilla has malicious intent, Harry. But you're right that we need to be vigilant about these things. The protection officer who intervened actually did us a favor by preventing this from happening without our knowledge. What do you want to do about it? I think we need to have a respectful but firm conversation with Camilla. Make it clear that we appreciate being consulted, but also establish that certain items and locations are non-negotiable when it comes to Mother's memory. The brothers agreed to present a united position during the evening's conference call, despite their personal differences. When it came to protecting Diana's legacy, they remained aligned in their commitment and determination. At 8 o'clock that evening, the conference call connected 4 different locations: Clarence House, where Camilla and Lady Margaret were present; Kensington Palace, where William and Sir David participated; Montecito, where Harry joined from his home office; and a secure government facility, where senior royal household officials monitored the conversation for protocol and security purposes. The call began with Lady Margaret providing a neutral summary of the day's events, carefully avoiding any language that might inflame tensions or assign blame. Her diplomatic skills were on full display as she presented the facts while leaving room for all parties to maintain their dignity. Your Royal Highnesses, Camilla began when it was her turn to speak, I want to assure you both that I have nothing but the deepest respect for your mother's memory. My intention was simply to optimize the lighting and arrangement in our main corridor. I had no desire to diminish the prominence or importance of the portrait. William responded first, his tone respectful but clear. We appreciate that, Camilla, and we understand your desire to make the residence comfortable for you and Father. However, the particular portrait in question holds special significance for Harry and me. It was placed in that location specifically because it's one of the first things visitors see when they enter the house. Harry's voice joined from California, the slight delay of the international connection adding weight to his words. The portrait represents Mother's continued place in our family and in Father's life. Any changes to how her memory is preserved and displayed are important to us. Camilla listened carefully to both princes, recognizing the emotional undercurrents in their voices. She had navigated these sensitivities for years, and she understood that her relationship with Charles's sons required constant attention and care. I completely understand your concerns, she replied. Perhaps we can find a solution that addresses everyone's needs. I'm certainly willing to explore alternatives that would improve the lighting situation without relocating the portrait itself. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with all parties working to find common ground. Various solutions were proposed and discussed: professional lighting consultations, minor adjustments to the portrait's positioning, and the addition of complementary artwork that might address Camilla's aesthetic concerns while preserving the portrait's prominent placement. By the end of the call, an agreement had been reached. The portrait would remain in its current location, but a lighting specialist would be brought in to assess and improve the illumination in the corridor. Additionally, Camilla would have the opportunity to make other decorative changes to the space that would reflect her personal taste while respecting the existing Diana-related displays. As the call concluded, all parties expressed satisfaction with the resolution. However, the incident had revealed the ongoing complexities of managing Diana's legacy within the modern royal family. It had also highlighted the important role that staff members like Sergeant Mitchell could play in preventing potential conflicts before they escalated into more serious problems. The evening ended with everyone understanding that this would not be the last time such situations would arise. Diana's presence in the royal family's life remained strong, and managing that presence would continue to require careful attention, diplomatic skill, and mutual respect from all involved parties. The lighting specialist arrived at Clarence House 3 days later, carrying equipment that looked more suited to a Hollywood film set than a royal residence. Dr. Sarah Chen was a world-renowned expert in museum and gallery lighting, with a PhD in art conservation and over 15 years of experience working with priceless artworks in institutions around the globe. Her reputation for discretion made her a natural choice for sensitive royal projects. Dr. Chen spent the morning examining the portrait and the surrounding corridor, taking precise measurements of light levels throughout different times of day. She photographed the painting from multiple angles, documenting how natural light from the tall windows interacted with the existing artificial lighting system. Her professional assessment would form the basis for any improvements that might be made to address Camilla's original concerns. Meanwhile, news of the portrait incident had begun to circulate through the extended royal household network. Staff members at various royal residences heard different versions of the story, each telling embellished with additional details and speculation. The tale of Sergeant Mitchell's intervention became the subject of intense discussion in palace corridors, servants' quarters, and security briefings. Some viewed Mitchell as a hero who had protected the royal family from an embarrassing scandal. Others saw his actions as an inappropriate overreach that had created unnecessary tension within the household. The debate reflected deeper questions about the role of royal staff and the boundaries of their authority to act independently when they perceived threats to the family's welfare. Mitchell himself remained professional and focused on his duties, but he was aware of the scrutiny his actions had attracted. He received messages of support from colleagues who respected his decision to prioritize protocol and family harmony. He also faced criticism from those who felt he had exceeded his authority and created problems where none had existed. The most significant development came 2 days after the conference call, when King Charles returned to Clarence House from a series of official engagements in Scotland. His absence during the portrait crisis had been noted by everyone involved, and his response to the situation would likely influence how similar matters were handled in the future. Charles was briefed about the incident by his private secretary immediately upon his arrival. The king listened to the explanation with the weary expression of someone who had spent decades managing the complex dynamics of royal family relationships. He understood better than anyone the challenges of balancing his wife's comfort and authority with his son's emotional needs regarding their mother's memory. That evening, Charles requested a private meeting with Sergeant Mitchell. The meeting took place in the king's study, a comfortable room lined with books and family photographs that reflected his wide-ranging interests and long life of public service. The atmosphere was informal, with Charles seated in an armchair rather than behind his desk, signaling his intention to have a personal rather than official conversation. "Sergeant Mitchell," Charles began, his voice carrying the distinctive tone that came from years of public speaking and official duties. "I understand you've had quite an eventful few days." Mitchell remained at attention despite the king's relaxed posture. "Yes, Your Majesty. I hope my actions didn't cause any undue problems for you or your family." Charles waved a hand dismissively. "Quite the contrary. I'm told that you prevented what could have been a much more serious situation. I wanted to thank you personally for your discretion and good judgment. I appreciate that, Your Majesty, though I must admit I wasn't entirely certain I was making the right decision at the time." "That's what makes it the right decision," Charles replied with a slight smile. "Anyone can follow clear orders or established procedures. True service requires the ability to make difficult judgments in uncertain situations." The conversation continued for nearly 30 minutes, with Charles asking detailed questions about Mitchell's reasoning and the sequence of events that had led to his intervention. The king was particularly interested in understanding how the situation had escalated and what lessons could be learned to prevent similar incidents in the future. "The thing is, Sergeant Mitchell," Charles said as their discussion neared its conclusion, "matters involving Diana's memory will always be sensitive in this family. My sons feel a deep responsibility to preserve and honor their mother's legacy, and I support them completely in that effort. At the same time, Camilla has the right to feel comfortable and at home in our residences. It's a delicate balance, Your Majesty." "Indeed it is. And it requires people like you who understand the broader implications of seemingly simple decisions. I want you to know that I have complete confidence in your judgment, and I hope you'll continue to exercise that judgment when similar situations arise." This royal endorsement of his actions provided Mitchell with significant relief and validation. Knowing that the king supported his intervention removed much of the uncertainty he had been feeling about his decision and its consequences. The lighting assessment completed by Dr. Chen revealed that Camilla's concerns about the corridor's illumination were actually well-founded. The natural light from the windows created glare at certain times of day that could potentially damage the portrait over time. The existing artificial lighting was also inadequate, leaving portions of the painting in shadow that obscured important details. Dr. Chen's recommendations included the installation of specialized LED lighting systems designed specifically for artwork, along with UV filtering film for the windows to protect against sun damage. The proposed improvements would not only address Camilla's aesthetic concerns but would also help preserve the portrait for future generations. The implementation of these lighting improvements became a collaborative project that demonstrated how potential conflicts could be transformed into positive outcomes through careful communication and professional expertise. Camilla worked closely with Dr. Chen to select lighting options that would enhance both the portrait and the overall appearance of the corridor. Prince William visited Clarence's house to see the improvements once they were completed. He was accompanied by his wife, Catherine, and their children, making it a family visit that reinforced the positive resolution of the portrait incident. The enhanced lighting revealed details in the painting that had previously been difficult to see, and the overall effect was dramatically improved. "It's beautiful," Catherine remarked as they stood before the portrait. "The new lighting really brings out the colors in Mother's dress and makes her eyes seem even more vibrant." William nodded in agreement, pleased with how the situation had ultimately been resolved. Camilla was right about the lighting issues. "I'm glad this all worked out in a way that benefits everyone." The children were fascinated by the portrait, asking questions about their grandmother and listening attentively to William's stories about Diana's life and legacy. These moments reinforced the importance of preserving Diana's memory not just for her sons, but for future generations of the royal family. Harry participated in the celebration of the lighting improvements through a video call from California, allowing him to see the enhanced portrait and express his satisfaction with the outcome. Despite the physical distance, his involvement demonstrated the family's continued unity when it came to honoring Diana's memory. The incident also led to broader discussions within the royal household about communication protocols and decision-making processes. New procedures were established to ensure that all parties would be consulted about changes to significant artworks and displays, preventing future misunderstandings and potential conflicts. Mrs. Forsyth, who had found herself caught in the middle of the original controversy, expressed relief at the new clarity about procedures. "Having clear guidelines makes everyone's job easier," she noted in a memo to senior staff. "We can focus on serving the family rather than trying to navigate uncertain protocol situations." For the broader royal household staff, the portrait incident became a case study in how difficult situations could be resolved through respectful communication and collaborative problem-solving. It demonstrated that even when initial positions seemed incompatible, creative solutions could often be found that satisfied everyone's legitimate interests. The story of Sergeant Mitchell's intervention also spread beyond the immediate royal household, though details remained largely confidential. Among security professionals and royal watchers, Mitchell became known as an example of thoughtful, principled service that put the institution's long-term interests ahead of short-term convenience. Dr. Chen's lighting improvements became the template for similar projects at other royal residences, leading to better preservation and display of the extensive royal art collection. Her work at Clarence's house demonstrated how professional expertise could resolve seemingly intractable problems while improving outcomes for everyone involved. As the weeks passed, the portrait incident faded from daily conversation within the royal household, but its lessons remained influential in how similar situations were approached. The experience had strengthened communication channels between different parts of the royal family and had established precedents for handling sensitive legacy issues in the future. The enhanced portrait continued to occupy its place of honor in the main corridor of Clarence's house, where it served as a reminder not only of Diana's enduring presence in the royal family but also of the importance of respectful dialogue and collaborative problem-solving in managing the complex relationships that defined royal life. 6 months after the portrait incident, Clarence's house had settled into a new rhythm that reflected the lessons learned from that tense afternoon. The enhanced lighting in the main corridor had become a source of pride for everyone involved, and visitors frequently commented on the beautiful display of Diana's portrait. What had begun as a potential crisis had transformed into an example of how the royal household could adapt and improve while respecting tradition and family sensitivities. Sergeant Mitchell found his role within the Royal Protection Service enhanced rather than diminished by his intervention. His willingness to make difficult decisions in real time had earned him the respect of colleagues and superiors alike. He was promoted to Senior Protection Officer and given additional responsibilities for coordinating security protocols across multiple royal residences. The promotion came with a ceremony at Windsor Castle, attended by senior members of the royal household staff and security services. King Charles personally presented Mitchell with his new insignia, taking the opportunity to publicly recognize his dedication to serving the royal family's broader interests. Sergeant Mitchell, the king said during the brief ceremony, exemplifies the best traditions of royal service. His actions remind us that true protection extends beyond physical security to safeguarding the reputation and harmony of the institution we all serve. Mitchell's wife and children attended the ceremony, proud to see his professional courage recognized at the highest levels. His daughter, a university student studying art history, was particularly interested in hearing about the portrait incident and its resolution. She understood better than most the cultural and historical significance of preserving Diana's legacy within the royal family. "Dad always taught us to do what's right, even when it's difficult," she told a colleague after the ceremony. "I'm proud that he was willing to take a stand when it mattered." The portrait itself had become something of a pilgrimage site for royal staff and official visitors to Clarence House. The combination of the enhanced lighting and the story of how it came to be improved had given the artwork additional significance beyond its already considerable historical and emotional value. Tour guides for official visits now included information about the conservation efforts that had been undertaken to preserve the portrait, though they were careful not to reveal the specific circumstances that had led to those improvements. The story of the lighting enhancement was told as an example of the royal family's commitment to preserving artistic treasures for future generations. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lighting specialist whose work had resolved the original dispute, had been retained by the Royal Collection Trust to assess and improve lighting throughout various royal properties. Her success at Clarence House had led to similar projects at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and other official residences. "The Clarence House project taught me a lot about working within the unique constraints and sensitivities of royal institutions," Dr. Chen reflected in an interview with a professional lighting journal. "Technical solutions must always be balanced against historical, emotional, and protocol considerations that don't exist in typical museum or gallery settings." Her work had resulted in significant improvements to the preservation and display of hundreds of artworks throughout the royal collection. The long-term benefits of proper lighting would help ensure that these cultural treasures would remain in excellent condition for centuries to come. For Camilla, the resolution of the portrait incident had provided valuable insights into the complex dynamics of royal family relationships. She had come to appreciate the deep emotional connections that William and Harry maintained with their mother's memory, and she had developed a greater understanding of how to navigate these sensitivities while still maintaining her own comfort and authority within the royal residences. The Queen Consort had also developed a strong working relationship with the lighting specialist and had initiated several other improvement projects that enhanced both the aesthetic appeal and conservation value of the royal art collection. Her interest in these projects had revealed a genuine appreciation for art and history that complemented her role as a guardian of royal cultural heritage. "I've learned that being a good custodian of these historic homes means balancing respect for the past with the practical needs of the present," Camilla remarked during a private dinner with friends. "Sometimes what seems like a simple decision turns out to be much more complicated, but the process of working through those complications often leads to better outcomes than we originally imagined." The relationship between Camilla and her stepsons had been strengthened by how the portrait situation was ultimately handled. The respectful dialogue and collaborative problem-solving had demonstrated that family differences could be resolved through open communication and mutual respect. This approach became a model for handling other sensitive situations that arose within the extended royal family. Prince William had incorporated lessons from the portrait incident into his own approach to managing royal properties and legacy issues. As heir to the throne, he understood that he would eventually face similar challenges in balancing tradition with the practical needs of a modern monarchy. "The portrait situation taught me the importance of clear communication and established procedures," William told his private secretary during a planning meeting. "When everyone understands the protocols and the reasoning behind them, it's much easier to prevent misunderstandings and resolve conflicts when they do arise." William had also gained a deeper appreciation for the role that royal staff played in protecting the institution's interests. His respect for Sergeant Mitchell's intervention had led to broader discussions about empowering staff members to raise concerns and make judgment calls when they perceived threats to the royal family's reputation or harmony. From California, Prince Harry had watched the resolution of the portrait incident with satisfaction and some surprise. His sometimes strained relationship with the royal institution had made him skeptical about whether his mother's memory would be properly protected and honored. The careful handling of this situation had provided reassurance that Diana's legacy remained important to the family and the institution. "It's good to see that there are still people within the system who are willing to stand up for what's right," Harry told his wife, Meghan, as they discussed the outcome. Mother's portrait staying in place might seem like a small thing, but it represents something much larger about how the family views her continuing importance. The broader royal household had also learned valuable lessons from the incident. New training programs were developed for staff members to help them understand the complex protocol and family dynamics that influenced their daily work. These programs emphasized the importance of communication, consultation, and respectful problem-solving when sensitive situations arose. Mrs. Helena Forsyth, who had found herself at the center of the original controversy, had become an advocate for clearer procedures and better communication between different levels of the royal household. Her experience had taught her that preventing problems was always preferable to solving them after they had already created tension and difficulty. The portrait incident showed us that we need better systems for handling situations that cross the boundaries between household management, family relationships, and institutional protocols, she wrote in a report to senior administrators. "When everyone understands their role and responsibilities, we can serve the royal family more effectively." The incident had also influenced academic discussions about the role of royal staff in protecting institutional interests. Several scholarly articles were published examining the balance between service and independent judgment in royal household management, though none revealed the specific details of the Clarence House situation. Professor Margaret Whitfield of Oxford University, a specialist in constitutional monarchy and royal history, noted in her research that royal servants have historically played crucial roles in preserving institutional stability by exercising discretion and good judgment in sensitive situations. The modern royal household continues this tradition while adapting to contemporary challenges and relationships. As the first anniversary of the portrait incident approached, Diana's portrait remained in its place of honor in the main corridor of Clarence House. The enhanced lighting continued to reveal new details and beauty in the artwork, and the successful resolution of the original controversy had become a source of quiet pride for everyone involved. The portrait served as a daily reminder of several important truths about royal service and family relationships: that respect for the past and openness to improvement could coexist, that apparent conflicts often contained the seeds of better solutions, and that institutions were ultimately strengthened by people who were willing to make difficult decisions in service of larger principles. Visitors to Clarence House continued to pause before the portrait, struck by both its artistic beauty and its emotional power. Few of them knew the story of how a royal protection officer's split-second decision had preserved not only the painting's prominent placement but also the collaborative approach that had led to its enhancement. For Sergeant Mitchell, now Senior Protection Officer Mitchell, the portrait incident had become a defining moment in his career and a source of lasting satisfaction. He had learned that true service sometimes required taking risks and making difficult decisions, but that principled action in service of worthy goals ultimately earned respect and recognition. Each time he passed the portrait during his daily rounds, Mitchell was reminded of the importance of staying vigilant for threats that went beyond physical security. The royal family's reputation, relationships, and legacy required protection that was every bit as important as their personal safety, and staff members at all levels had a role to play in providing that protection. The portrait of Princess Diana continued to watch over the main corridor of Clarence House, beautifully lit and lovingly preserved, a testament to enduring love, family loyalty, and the power of respectful dialogue to transform potential conflicts into positive outcomes. The lessons learned from one tense afternoon had strengthened the royal household's ability to serve its unique and challenging mission, ensuring that both tradition and progress could flourish within the ancient institution of the British monarchy.